What's up, founders? Welcome back to the Starter Founder Roadmap. Today we have Jean-Michel Moreau. I hope I said that name
You
perfectly.
did.
Coming on the podcast. Man, I'm super excited to have this conversation about SaaS growth and scaling companies. Jean, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I see a lot of people making content specifically on LinkedIn about SaaS growth.
Yeah.
When you're talking about SaaS growth, one of my questions I always ask people, is this something you focus on before or after product market fit?
Definitely before. Or another way to frame it is there's a lot of questions that you have before you have product market fit. You have these big questions around, what is the right category for my app? Everybody's favorite example is like Loom.com, right? Loom.com, they launched just like everybody else. They were another screen recorder. And then they changed the category. They started saying, we're here to eliminate wasted meetings and to support remote work. And now they're the category king. They lead that part of the market. And the app is exactly the same. They've just changed a little bit the framing. So there's these huge questions that you have about your product before you found product market fit. And there's tools in marketing that you can use to really accelerate the amount of feedback that you're getting from the market to answer those quicker.
That is such a good point, because I think there's a big discussion I always see about what is product market fit, or, how does it work? And there's not one real key definition, but I always thought that it would be good to have that before you go into growth. Because like, if I know who I'm serving, I know they love it, they're paying for it, it's blowing up, then I can focus on scaling. But you're saying do that opposite.
Yeah, I'm saying that you can use a lot of the marketing tools to help answer your questions about, what exactly is the right positioning? What is the main pain point that we're going to frame our whole application around? You can answer those questions before you're worried about scaling or, really, putting a lot of money and higher risk into your marketing campaigns.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So if I'm a founder, I've got my product market fit, things are scaling, it's looking good. The platform is growing. What are the key marketing strategies that you kind of lean on for scaling SaaS companies? Because I've talked to people that do only SEO stuff, or some people only do content marketing. And I even talked to some people now who only use influencers, which I think is a really interesting model. So what's kind of your favorite?
Each company has a different, ideal mix of how they get their clients. And it really depends on the market and the product and also like the company's capabilities, right? So I don't think there's one right answer, but what I like to do is there are several questions that you're going to have to answer that you need to optimize before you start worrying about exactly which channel. I think it makes me think of two extreme examples. One extreme example, there's a movement called build in public where people build their app.
Yeah.
And one kind of failure mode in the build in public movement is you don't have any distribution. You build a whole app, no one uses it, and you conclude it's a bad idea and you move on to the next idea. But who knows? Maybe only 20 people saw that application. You don't really know. There's a similar problem when you're trying to pick your channel. If you have inconsistent messaging that doesn't resonate with your target buyer because you haven't scaled, you don't know yet for sure, testing really bad messaging across all the channels is very expensive. To me, it's the wrong order. So I like to just make sure the messaging is really nailed first, and then you can apply that messaging to whichever channels or your channel tests.
So when I'm choosing my message, is it better? Because I've literally gotten this question on Twitter from founders, so I love that you brought this up. So when I'm choosing my messaging, is it better to get on the calls with my ideal prospects and, have the conversation with them, do that with 20 or 30 people? Or is it better to share that content and put it in videos or blog posts or whatever it is to get that feedback?
Yeah, I think it's a both and, but there's specific ways that if you structure your content, the data is easier to interpret. So that's a really difficult problem with content. People might engage with it. They might just think, oh, this is cool, or they might be very curious about the topic and they're never going to buy. And you have this risk of, putting out content that low intent audiences might find interesting. And then you start optimizing for curiosity. You start optimizing for what gets likes, and it doesn't help you build a buying audience. So that's one of the problems that you have to contend with. But what I like to do is there's like 3 ways you can structure your work so that it's much easier to interpret. first of all, it's great to talk to customers. And I think if you have 50 or so discovery calls, I think you can make any B2B product work. You're going to know
Yeah.
enough about how they see the problem. But at the same time, you can start thinking about everything you've learned in those discovery calls. What are all the ways that they see the problem? And if you start making videos that are single topic, like short videos, maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, where it's a single topic, single angle, single topic, you can slice it up many ways. If you start putting out many, many, many of those across, like systematically across the different areas of interest of your potential buyers, you're going to be able to see from your watch statistics what topics are working. And because it's just one topic, you're going to start to see, oh, you know what? When I pay to boost a post, let's say I'm talking about, product market fit versus scaling. I'm pick some examples out of the hat, right? I
Yeah.
may find that it costs me $1 to get someone to watch a whole video on one topic, where another topic costs 10 cents. So you can start to really see very quickly exactly what people are willing to watch. And you're measuring their behavior, which is really key. Not what they say in a survey, but their actual behavior.
I love that because the behavior is more of the truth than what they say in a survey. I find that with surveys, you can get a lot of skewed data because it's really hard to measure who's filling out the survey and who they are, what
Yes.
their intentions are, and what they actually care about. Because some people will tell you on the survey that I like this thing and this is what I care about. But in reality, they've never invested in that. They've never put
Yeah.
money or time into it. So surveys I've never been that much of a fan of. I like to get on Zoom calls and talk to people. Or for me, my secret trick is to make content out of even my customer interviews. So I do it with my
Mm-hmm.
podcast. So that's kind of my secret strategy. So I love this approach you have. So I know you said there were three. What's the third? There's one more I think you really want to
Oh
get
no.
into.
What did I say already? We mentioned 50 calls, and then we talked about specific, like super niche videos. One more point about those videos is that they have to be extremely niche for this to work. So if you make broadly interesting videos overall, of course they're going to outperform your kind of bottom of funnel topics. You need to pick
Yeah.
very high intent topics that are really niche that nobody would ever else find interesting that isn't your customer, and then that trick works.
I want to say something to that because I've done
Yeah.
this before. I've done content where I'm like, here's how you can get your podcast sponsored. And like the video will do okay or whatever. I did one about how sports podcasts that have less than 20 episodes can get sponsored. It did tremendously well. It was
Yeah.
so specific, and I was talking from experience of like, this is what I personally did at this stage of having this sports podcast that got me sponsored and made all this money. And it was like, I think 4 or 5 layers deep on the
Yes.
subject. And I think that's what
Yes.
really helped.
Exactly. It's very hard to compete on the top of funnel. There's so many things. Now we have like AI generated faceless content for top of funnel
Yeah.
that you're fighting against, right? So I think it's easier to demonstrate your expertise and see what people are interested in if you're going very specific at the bottom, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
And the third item would be, so we're talking about like how to measure what, topics and what positioning works, is to run very, very specific ads where you're just focusing on the difference in performance based on what positioning you use.
Can you go into detail on that one a little bit? And well,
Sure.
really,
Yeah.
when it comes to ads, I always ask people like, how much are you telling founders to spend on these ads? Because like, if we're talking to a bootstrap founder that doesn't
Yeah.
have the VC backing, they may have $500 $1,000 laying around. Like, is that the budget, or can I start with
Yeah.
like a $2 a day campaign?
Yes. Well, there's so many different ways to make it work and to get attention online. The techniques that I specialize in, they usually take founders around $5,000 to completely finish a funnel. So that means like basically understanding the messaging, the pain point, the angle, getting an ad working, unlocking a landing page, and starting to get inbound leads working, and understanding basically your cost per customer acquisition. And then with that whole funnel in place, with all of those pieces validated, you're able to decide to buy whatever growth you want at whatever you can handle. And it really changes the scaling problem. People think about it like a marketing problem, but in reality, it's an operations problem. Once you've unlocked a funnel, growing is very, very easy. The hard part is just like, how do you manage that at a company level? So that's what I do, but that's not appropriate for everyone. If you're just starting out and you don't have funds, you shouldn't go spend $5,000 on ads.
Wait, I like the way you broke that down though, in terms of that it's not a marketing it's not a marketing problem, it's more so operations. I do
Yeah.
agree in a sense that like once you have the foundation set, you know what's going on, you know who you're serving, the product is working and everything. Then it's about putting more into that machine so it can flow even better, so you can get better
Yeah,
results. I think where
exactly.
most founders are is either at the beginning stage where they're trying to figure out what works. And then, like you said, at the second stage of being stuck, it's really like, okay, I know what works. How do I get this to work even more? Like, I
Yeah.
think those are really the two kind of founders I run into a lot.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. Either you're kind of at the beginning of the journey, you don't even have 100 users yet, or the other kind of group that I see is maybe your first channel is you can't turn up the heat anymore. So a lot of people, maybe they've started with SEO, they're getting sales from SEO, they've built a bit of a company, but now what? You can't make more search volume just happen. So what do they do now?
So I guess my next question would be, when do you add that second channel? Like, when would you say that? Because I know you earlier on you mentioned that having one channel is like the best way to start. When do
Yeah.
you add that second channel?
Yeah, there's different takes on this. There's the risk perspective and then the mastery perspective. Um, I would say like the failure mode, like what not to do, what I see is people trying all the channels to see what works. So I'll do
Yeah.
everything, and it's just too difficult. There's too difficult for a small team to get better across 50 things. So this is why I'm a big fan of figuring out one and making it work. And with one channel, you can take any business to $1 million a year. I don't think that's a problem. And you can start adding, when you start to see diminishing returns, you can consider adding another channel. From a risk point of view, it does feel a lot better to have two than one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. I run into most of the people I've had on the show, they either talk about SEO, some talk about ads, but mostly it's SEO and content
Mhm.
marketing.
Yeah.
What are kind of like the best channels you see right now in terms of SaaS companies, bootstrap founders, that are at that, let's say 50K, or I mean, as low as 20K MRR level? Like, what
Mhm.
in terms of channels are you seeing work best for them?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to give a group index, for like all of SaaS because
Yeah.
it's enormous. It's really a juggernaut. But what I would say, if you have one channel and it's content or SEO, then a lot of people, I would say, the next test is, how can you get paid acquisition working? Because then you can control your growth rate. Becomes a very solvable problem to decide how much you want to grow this year. And what I generally do with clients is, first we use Meta because it's the easiest place to use, like a lab, like a test lab. It's the cheapest and quickest place to do your experimenting. So then, and then once you figured out your messaging and what works on Meta, you might as well scale that and then add another one. Typically, like the world's next biggest search engine, which I know you already know, is YouTube, right? So
Yeah.
that would be a great next choice. But there can be specific considerations if you're in an industry or you serve very young people. Okay, maybe not LinkedIn. There's some specific considerations, but those are two good default choices if you are not in some extreme category.
Yeah, I agree. I think Facebook is still, or Meta is still, just the overall best because it's just the easiest to get into. It's something that I think a lot of people have used. It's kind of, I want to say, foundational in online marketing and ads and stuff. Like, it's just the foundation of it all. And YouTube and Google are like second right there. And I
Yeah.
think as a founder, you pretty much have to learn that at some point. You're going to have to learn something about it. So just get ready.
Yes. Yes. I know, and everyone says, it's dead or it's changed or that no one's there. But everyone is still there enough that you can get them. That's the thing. Even for, very high-end B2B clients. For myself, for example, I run ads and I'm attracting, SaaS founders, Series A, Series B, SaaS founders,
Really?
and
Wow.
on Meta. Yeah.
I
They're
was
still
going to
there.
ask you about that. That's surprising because
Yeah,
I would think that those people are on LinkedIn or maybe X. So finding
they
them on
are.
Meta is crazy. Wow.
Well, that's the thing. All marketing works, right? It's only a question of efficiency. So if I have the right message, if I'm putting it out there, if my target person sees it, I'm speaking directly to them in a way that shows I actually have the experience. It's very easy to catch their attention. And that's I think in the end, like it's empathy that wins, like empathy and experience, because it might seem like, well, there's so much competition in online marketing. But then on the other hand, there aren't that many marketers that were previously SaaS founders that have my experience. I don't use the word bro, for example. That's like, it sets me apart and it makes it easy to catch their attention.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. Wow. So it seems like ads are still kind of the way to go for founders, but you're saying they should work their way there first, and then you want to jump out there and start running ads and stuff and make that a priority. I think that makes a lot of logical sense for most startup founders, honestly. I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it does depend on what kind of resources you have. But I just think about what's your life energy worth? I see so many people grinding, trying to learn cold outreach or doing it manually. And it's true
Oh,
that like that doesn't cost you money. But if you have to do outreach like 4 hours a day, it's hard to build a company and you have to still learn how to do cold outreach. And, you might be you could spend a year on that and not see great returns. Whereas ads, you at least have the volume. You can learn immediately what works and know tomorrow what to do differently. Versus outreach, you're like, maybe I should change my script. Is it this? What is it? Very difficult.
I so agree, man. I was talking to one founder and I told him I'm like, I've added an extra job just so I can take that money and put it into my business for ads and stuff. Like, I think that's not an insane thing for founders to do. Like, if you're a founder
Yeah.
and you don't have a bunch of money for ads, which is understandable where a lot of people start, I think one of the best things you can do is get some kind of part-time job and literally take the money from that and put it in here. You could just work the part-time job for a couple months, save all of that up, give yourself some runway to run ads and see what works. I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's the way you can be a more strategic founder in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to look at like what are we trying to do as founders? We're trying to get a certain kind of return on our investment. And if you compare it to other ways to get a return on investment, the opportunity is ridiculous. If you want to get 7x return,
Yeah.
you can't do that with stocks or real estate or the other like standard ways. So it should, how do I say this properly? It's like it should be difficult to build a cash machine, but once you have it, you have it.
Yeah, and that's what SaaS is to me. I think it's one of the few business models where I think, in my opinion, it's the hardest to get right.
Yeah.
But getting the SaaS right gets you just enormous results. Like, it's kind of otherworldly, to be honest. I got to ask you this. I love having this conversation with people. What is your opinion on no code?
It's great. I think it's great in that that's going to give more people an opportunity to build software. I think, yeah, it's like lowering the barrier to entry for certain kinds of products, and it also is pushing funded companies away from those areas into like more complexity, I would say. But what do you mean specifically? You mean in terms of entrepreneurship, or what angle are you thinking?
Yeah, more like entrepreneurship, SaaS, all of that stuff, just because it's so interesting to me how you can have an idea today, an MVP tomorrow. Maybe not
Yes.
super polished and looking perfect, but like the idea that you can get that kind of like validation that fast, I think it
Yeah.
just gets you a step closer to product market fit even faster.
Yes. I'm with you, but I still believe that you want to validate the marketing funnel first, even before there's an
Mm.
MVP. I know that's not the most common way to think about it, but why put any effort into building something if you don't know you can sell it? You,
Well, this is kind of okay. So I want to kind of explain to you how I see the funnel from my perspective.
yeah.
It's kind of like you attract them, you get their attention through whatever way. Then you have their interest. So you might have them on a webinar, you can send some emails out, all of that stuff. And then you go to the sales process. Like, now you're selling. So if
Mm-hmm.
I don't have at least the MVP, how am I running a funnel at that
Yes.
point?
there's so many great ways, famous ways that people have done this. Even funded companies have done this, where they validate everything to like the last, inch before building, because it's a huge
Mm.
risk. Even with no code, the capital you have to put in to build something that's actually good is really hard. It's a lot of effort to do that. Software is still hard. And so we really want to make sure that we have a eager audience. We've validated demand. And when you look at a business, I would say there's like three major categories of risk. You have the financial risk, like is the model viable? You have the technical risk, like can we build it? And then the biggest risk is, do people want this thing? That's the biggest risk. And you can answer that question before building anything. And so maybe one famous example from the lean startup guys would be buffer.com. It's like a marketing product. And
Yeah, social
so,
media, right?
yeah, it's kind of a basic thing, lets you queue posts. So when they were launching, they famously ran a funnel all the way, it looks like the product exists, all the way to put in your credit card. And it says, oh, we're not ready. Thanks. And then they started putting in different pricing. Do you want this price, or this price, to see which ones do people click? And then they still haven't built it. It's still not ready to go. Oh, thanks, you caught us before. Sorry, it's too early. We didn't charge your card, and you're on a waiting list. So you can do similar things, and you should, before investing the capital to really build an app. Because
Wow, that is.
you can answer that question for $1,000, $500. You could see you've run enough traffic, you can get numbers on the actual cost to get different acquisitions or almost acquisitions. And imagine versus building an app, like 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 in developer fees, very easy.
Wow. I'm gonna call that the blind funnel. That's what it sounds like to me. Kind of
They
like
call it the back door, or
yeah,
fake door. Yeah.
that's it. That's an insane process, but it makes so much sense because if I can fill up a funnel in a week, 2 weeks, a month, and get a certain amount of people going through there that are ready to pay me,
Yes.
it's kind of like I've already found a product market fit, honestly, and that's even before the
Yeah.
product is made or anything.
Yeah. You've
Wow.
sold the concept, right? Because people aren't buying the product; they're buying this concept of their imagined solution, right? So you're just seeing, are people willing to trade me an email? Are they willing to trade me a phone number? Are they willing to trade me even their credit card number? I won't mention which product, but I think I paid $1,000 just to be on a wait list for a SaaS app. So it's not even built.
Wow.
They launched it to an email list, and it's like, to be on the beta user list, you have to pay. And so it's possible to do these things. It takes the risk
Wow.
out.
Charging to be on a wait list, that's wow.
That's the next level.
Yeah, that's different
Yeah.
right there. I was just gonna
Yeah.
ask about, like, I've seen some where they'll go through kind of the process, like you said, of the wait list, and then at the end it's just like a regular Stripe link, like, hey, here's our beta pricing. If you pay this, then you don't have to pay anything for a year. I've seen that a
Yeah.
couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good way to go. Yeah. But the
Wow.
you just want to look at, like, I like to think very simply and think, what are the largest risks, like survival risks to the business? And then how can I answer these as cheaply and quickly as possible? And a lot of times the easiest answer is like, well, build a business, market it, see if it works. If it fails, that will give you the answer, but it's very expensive. And sometimes there's marketing tricks you can use to answer these questions really quickly.
Wow. Yeah, man, this is some golden information. I like the way you've put the spin on this. So even if there's a person listening is a bootstrap founder who might not have a bunch of money laying around to execute this, I do think there are still some great ideas and concepts to kind of follow and try to execute. Because from my experience, I've run campaigns where I'm spending like $100 a week and still got really good results.
Yeah.
Obviously it's going to be more if you 10x that, obviously. But I do think a lot of bootstrap founders should kind of start where they are with what they have. And that kind of propels you to get to that next level,
It's all you can. It's the only place you can start, right? Like with what you have right now where you are. Yeah. And I think, SaaS is pretty difficult. And a lot of people maybe jump right into it because just the dream of scalability and how easy it is to go very far. But it's a very difficult first time thing to make work. And a lot of times it's easier to build a service business first. It's much less risk. Attract the same people, solve their problem in a different way. And once you've talked to enough of them, you can automate some of that solution and sell it back.
I love it, man. I love the way you put your spin on this. Jean, this was a great conversation. Let the people know
Thanks,
where they
Chris.
can find you, and some of the founders, some of the VCs listening, let them know how they can work with you.
Yeah, if you're looking, if you want to get my guide to unlocking product growth, go to try.rapidproductgrowth.com. And if you want to talk to me directly about how to unlock growth for your company and apply some of these methods, go to freegrowthsession.com.
All right, man. Sounds good. Thank you again for being such an amazing guest.
Thank you, Chris. A lot of fun.